So I'm going to go ahead and start with our introductions. So everybody, thanks for joining us. And I see, well, yeah, people are just coming in as I'm talking, so that's fantastic. We're so happy to have everybody here, and this is our first sessions of the day at this time. I hope you enjoyed the keynote if you were up that early or that late, I guess, depending on where you are. We have quite the international crowd. It's fantastic. Almost 200 people this morning. I think we're at 197. It was great. And of course, we want to thank our sponsors for this, Watchful being our top sponsor. We really appreciate it. And then we have Buddy, Joomla, OS Training, PHP Prefixer, Rockin, and RS Joomla, our silver sponsors. And then we also have a set of bronze sponsors and our community sponsors. We couldn't have done all of this without that. It pays for the technology, it paid for the marketing, all of that. And so we really appreciate our sponsors, and we do hope that you drop by their booths. Some of them have specials. I know at OS Training, we've got a special for you guys if you're interested. So go and check them out. We're going to have some people live in their booths today as well. But I know you're going to be really busy in these sessions because we have fabulous, fabulous topics today, I feel like. And the first one here with Philip, who is an inventor, which would really be interested in having a session about what all he's invented, but we have to talk about Joomla today. He's a juggler, a cat owner, and I do know that because whenever he and I met, I saw like, I don't know how many dozens of cats behind him. Lots and lots of cats. And he's a rower, because he couldn't meet with me one day because he was, like in a regatta or something. So yeah. He's worked on some very large Joomla websites. So he has fantastic experience here. He's talking from experience. He's worked on enterprise level websites with Joomla, which is always a great person to talk to because they've probably seen some things that just the average Joomla builder hasn't seen out there. Yeah. He is also currently coordinating the Joomla Summer of Code, which I think is just one of the best little programs that we're involved in. I really think it's a great program. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hop off the stage. I'm going to let Philip take over the stage and start his session. And I'll let him introduce his session as opposed to me doing that. So, and if you have any questions, by the way, put them in the Q&A. I'll be moderating those for Philip. And then I will ping you, Philip, when your 45 minutes is up and we need to do a few answers. Okay?
Yep, that'd be great. Okay, so let's try sharing the screen. Is that now sharing? It looks like it is. So the talk I'm doing today is really about login and several different aspects, quite high level. I won't go too much into the code. We've done a little bit more in Joomla London, and it's a topic that I want to keep coming back to with Joomla. I should explain, I've helped run the London user group. And so we do a lot more developer talks there. So if anyone's interested in these topics, ping us, come along to the Joomla London meetings, and we will be going into these in greater detail. And so we usually structure those with a speaker and then a workshop afterwards, so you can actually code along. So today, federated login, WebAuth in Joomla 4 and Recapture 3. And these were three topics that I brought together. And one of my clients is the UK police, and it's a really hot topic at the moment with phishing and all that sort of thing. So I'll go through the slides. So what's it all about, phishing? Well, if you know your Monty Python, this is the moment that Harold gets eaten and the classic line comes out, what's it all about? And phishing is when attackers attempt to trick users into doing the wrong thing, such as clicking a bad link that will download malware or directing to a dodgy website. So big examples of the malware would be where there's been ransoms charged because someone in an organization has clicked on a link, introduced malware to their system, and then the malware has encrypted the hard drives, and then there's been ransoms for getting the hard drives back, the encryption taken off for the sum of X number of Bitcoins. And there's been a lot of high-profile ones in the press quite a lot recently. Phishing, number one security problem on the web. 81% of hack-related account breaches leveraged weak or stolen password. And that was from Google I/O 2018. And I think it's only just getting worse. been a lot of problems in highlighted on a lot of radio programs recently in the UK, where the people are using caller ID, and I'll come on to that a little later. They're using some of the tools that we use to reassure people that they're genuine when they're not, and it's making it very difficult sometimes to see who is genuine and who isn't. So caller ID is where the organization's name comes up on your phone, but that can be hijacked very easily. And so these are all parts of the tools that phishing people that are doing phishing will leverage. What they're doing is they're often buying domain names or extensions to names which are very similar spelling, and making themselves look like genuine third-party organizations like banks and other institutions. Identity federation, what is it and why? Well, sign up or sign in with an account hosted by a third-party website, which is called an identity provider. That's someone like Google, someone like Facebook. These are people that you've already signed up with and you've got accounts with. You've gone through the whole authentication process with them. And so when you're using an identity federation, you can leverage the fact that you don't need additional passwords because you've already signed up with those organizations and the systems they're using. So you're delegating the security challenge. You're not being asked to set up a new account, new passwords, yet another password to remember. And they provide profile information back. So when you do identity federation signups, what's actually happening is the website that you're using, say Joomla site, is going off using their protocols. They are then sending back some of that information so that you can store that. And I'll go into that in more detail in a little while. There's two big examples. OpenID and OAuth are both examples. I'll open the links so that you can see. So OpenID and OAuth are standards and frameworks, and using these we can do authentication against them. So I'm going to focus on the OAuth and Google system, and they've got a JavaScript library, a one-tap sign-up, auto-sign, and it's a way to use Google Federation that allows a much easier way to add users to your site. And using the federation model, it helps you to increase the usage, the take up. Now, we've all seen this where you go to sign up for a service and they say you can sign in with Facebook, with Google, and other well-known groups. And so I'm going to take you through what's needed to, on a very high level, what's needed to actually put that on your website, and why you might do that. So one of the things to bear in mind with this is when you're doing these sorts of sign up, you're actually getting permissions, and you are getting a series of permissions. And one of the things that is best practice with is incremental authorization. And you probably have this when you've got an app and it says you're authorizing this app to do X, Y, and Z. And it might be a huge long list of things. And I sometimes sit there and think, well, why do they need all of that now? I don't actually want to do this, that, and the other. I just want to do X, but not Y and Z. And so actually best practice at the moment is incremental authorization. One example I'll put here is imagine that the authorization is letting you into a house. You don't necessarily swing open all the doors and let that person into all the rooms. They've come in for a specific thing, like a tradesperson. They might ask to go use the loo. They might ask to go to a specific place to do the plumbing or whatever. They need the authorization to go there. They don't need the authorization to go everywhere. And when they need to go to that room, they ask to go to that room. And so that is more what incremental authorization is about. It's not saying, here, have everything. It's saying, okay, what do you need to do what you're doing? And we'll give you permission to do that, but no more. And then when you need to go somewhere else or do something else, you ask again. And so that's a simplistic example of incremental authorization. Now, with the JavaScript library that you get with Google, it really is very simple to get a sign up button on your website. And I'm actually going to show you a very simple user case here. So these are literally the 3 lines of code that you need. You need to reference the Google API and put that into your head. You need to put a meta tag into your head. And this is your client ID when you sign up to Google's console tools. And let me just see if I've got that still up here. So if I pull this over here, hopefully you can see. Tell me, Robbie, if you can't see. Is that still showing? Yeah, latest one. Okay. Yes, great. Okay, because I know with some systems you don't get to see the newer windows. So here is one that I built a little while ago, in fact today, and I've got my client ID. It's taken me less than 5 minutes to sign up, go through the process, and what I'm saying is that the site that I am registering will be on this domain. I'm locking it all down to this so that it already knows where it's coming from. It knows the identity of who is going to be authenticating against, and we're going to be using Google's OAuth to do that. So I've got another site here. It's a little test site, which I've been playing around with. Let me just find it, and I put the button on there. Too many windows, death by windows. I'll open it again so I can show you. So this is a little private project. I haven't really done much to it, but I actually thought for this talk about a month ago, I would use this for a few little things. So I'm going to reload the page here and see if we can get here. So because I've got the page open somewhere else under all my stacks of things, if I reload, you'll see it will identify me and sign me in. But this is a simple Google button. I placed it on here. I've literally placed it with 1 line of code in a module. And that line of code is, go back to the presentation, in here. And that was all that I needed to do to put the button on the page and get the Google sign in, sign out button. So what's actually happening here?
Here's a matching Google result.
Ah, that's good. Shh, Google. Interrupted by Google. So after you've signed in, you can then use more of their tools. There's a function here, signed in, which in the console log, you can see the ID, the name, the image URL, and the email. But for something like Joomla, we'd really want to authenticate with a backend server. And this is a link to how you'd set up the backend server. So effectively, there's tokens, there's exchanges. Once the identity has been proven, there's systems in place to make it quite simple to authenticate. Then you can collect information that Google has from the person when they originally signed up, like their email address, and then store that in your database. So you've got that information. So it is a quick way of signing up. And I'm going to show you some examples. So there's a few companies here who are using it. And these are stats that Google gave a little while back. So Redfin, they increased their signups by 80% just by having Federation sign up. New users returned 5 times, returning 5 times or more was up by 40%. So that's a lot of engagement. That's a really good engagement with their audience. Trivigo, they increased their signups by 50% by moving from their old system where you had to fill in the email, make sure that you'd clicked to say that it was yours, and then going through that process. So by putting Federation on there, people can use not just Google, but Facebook and other systems. And their sign up was up by 50%. Number of signed up users 2 times. This particular one, which I'll show in a second, the facts are actually true. It's 43 times more users, so 4,300% increase. And the user engagement, i.e. people that were doing likes, that were saving music, that were doing bits in their profile, that went up by 50%. So these are really big increases in usage. So let's have a quick look at these. And some of these I did log in earlier, so they may log me in really quickly. And that's one of the things about them. So let's go back. Let me just escape and go back one. Thank you. Right. No, it's not going to. Here we go. So this is a login sign up. And if I do the sign up, then I can continue. I've already gone through it once, but literally this is what you get. Sign up with Redfin Real Estate with Google, continue as Philip, and I'm in. No password. All the password is dealt with originally when you log in with Google, and if you have to authenticate with Google, I don't have to use a password when signing up or signing in with this website. So let's go back to the presentation, and here we go. And there it was. It's actually detected me. I previously signed up, and because it knows that I've signed up, the JavaScript code is going off, it's running, and it's re-authenticating me against them. So I actually haven't had to do anything at all. It's incredibly quick, and it's authenticating against Google. I can log out, and there you go. And if I reload again, I can then continue. I can log in as a different identity, different Google identity. So, for example, my Joomla community identity, or I can log in with this one. Again, no passwords. And let's try this one. English. And again, there you go. So again, all of these have been logins where I haven't been asked for a password because I'm authenticating against a federation, I'm authenticating against Google, Facebook, whoever. So you can see how much easier it is for your users if you're using a federated system. So, advantages of one-tap sign-up, which is what all of those are. And if you want to go and play with those, it's quite interesting, the actual process. It's so easy. One-tap sign-up, cross-browser support. So it really doesn't matter. I've tried in lots of different browsers. It works in all of them. And no email verification needed. And that is a massive advantage. No email verification required. So we've got some of our clients are quite big, one of them in the NHS, and used to do a thing with Shell, and people losing the email verification, people losing it in spam, not understanding, not going through the very simple instructions, meant we had a big drop off. And it can be a real burden when people cannot get through to your system because the email's gone to the junk, they're just busy, they've lost it, they just can't follow the process. Or, for example, their mail system's really slow, they do the sign up and the email doesn't come through for a while. And it can be because, we've had situations where servers have had issues with third parties, so Hotmail's just not cooperating, Microsoft is being particularly difficult. I even had one situation where a client that was hosted with BT was actually being denied to sign up with a BT account because BT wasn't trusting BT. So, things like that can happen. And if they can't get the verification email, then they can't go through the process. So using this federated system, it just eliminates that need. So there's a lot of links here. I'm not going to go through them all now, but these are all of the information you really need to set this sort of system up. And goes through, gets you through the system. I'm quite keen on playing around with these a bit more. If anyone's interested, if you want to contact me, I'm looking to develop some more of these features to make it easier on websites. Now, Recapture is another thing I wanted to talk about, and it's to do with, and in fact, the naturally relaxing site, I'm just going to show you that. I deliberately set it up, and let me find the backend login for this, and I will show you some interesting stuff. So what I did was I set this up with, I haven't publicized this website at all. I set it up with registration being enabled, and I'm going to show you the users that I've now got. So these are all the registered users, and they're total spam. And this was all collected within a month. You can see sign-up days going along. This is absolutely all spam. There's about 190 users in here. And this is what happens when you have a system which is open to the web and bots can go along, find the sign-ups and just sign up. So unless you've got email verification, unless you've got Recapture, it is easy to become flooded with signups from bots, and that's not good. It doesn't look particularly appetizing for a client if they come in and they see a lot of these weird and wonderful usernames. And it was just a little experiment. As I say, this is a domain name I've had for quite a while, but there's been no website there. There's no real traffic out there at all. I haven't advertised it, and yet they're finding it and they're signing up. So most attempts to hack are via bots. Recapture is not just about stopping bots signing up. It's to stop bots signing in as well, because bots can sign in. One of the things that I remember reading years ago was bots tend not to use a credit card. So if you put a paywall there, yeah, you're going to stop them. But anything else they will try to do. And I've written scripts myself that can get around quite a few sign-ups for various reasons. So you do need something that's quite robust. And Recapture came along really to try and stop this sort of thing happening. Interesting, the figure for the sites protected by Recapture version 2 is less than the number of Joomla sites, 2 million, in 2018. I actually thought Recapture would be bigger than that. But when I was doing the research for this a couple of months ago for Joomla London, I was actually quite surprised how few there were that were using it. Recapture 3 is the next, because we've had many different types now. We've had the invisible one, we've had the challenge ones, we've had the invisible one, and they've gone through different phases. At one point, I was having to, every single Google search I did, I was having to verify that I was not a robot and clicking on various bits and bobs to say what's a tractor and what was a bus, or what's a bicycle and traffic light, because it was suspicious of the things that I was asking. And so, and there have been problems with Recapture in the past. The NHS in the UK was hit where anyone in the NHS was suspected of being a hacker. So for a little while, it was very difficult to use anything with Recapture. But these things, they're adapting all the time. And Recapture 3 has an adaptive risk analysis engine. You can set the threat level, and depending on the score, allow the login. If the score is a certain level, then it will challenge with further authentication questions or forwarded by an email to a human intervention. And you can attach Recapture 3 on different, and that's supposed to say, events. So, that's a really useful way of stopping bots from going around various parts of your site. You can have the different strengths of Recapture 3 at different points in your site, and stopping the bots from doing different things. So this is pretty seamless. I've been playing with it a little bit. It's pretty seamless, and I haven't seen any particular problems with it. And here's the information if you want to go and have a look at it. You can execute Recapture on as many actions as you want on the same page, and programmatically invoke the challenge. So it's an evolving system to try and tackle evolving threats. How am I doing for time? Nearly half past, right. So Recapture 3, simple JavaScript library, load JavaScript into the head, add a callback function to handle the token, and that's the little function there. So we'll do some more workshops in Joomla London, and if anyone's particularly interested, then do contact me and we can play around with some of this. You add the attributes to an HTML button, so it's a class in this case. So button class equals G Recapture, and then you've got site key and then the callback on submit, and this allows it to do the threat analysis. And as I say, you get a bit of a graphical interface which is showing what's going on, and you can set various different levels, so you can be more strict, less strict, and watch the traffic that's coming through. Recapture learns by seeing real traffic on your site. For this reason, scores in the staging environment or soon after implementing may differ from production. So it really is adaptive, really is learning. It really is seeing what you're intercepting, what you're thinking should be allowed. It's looking at the frequency, the types of traffic that you have, and from that it can work out what's unusual. And if anyone's had any bigger sites, I've got a couple of big sites which have been targets of DOS attacks in the past. I've had to use quite a few different tools to stop them being overwhelmed. This sort of thing, which is adaptive, which can watch out for those weird and sudden spikes, is really, really useful. As Recapture 3 doesn't ever interrupt the user flow, you can first run Recapture without taking action, and then decide on thresholds by looking at your traffic in the admin console. By default, you can use a threshold of 0.3. So you can basically ramp it up slowly and or pull it back to make it more or less difficult and get more and more interventions. On average, users share the same password with 20% of their accounts. And this is a massive problem, and one that everyday life I come into. One site that will remain nameless but was quite big, when we signed up to do the contract, there was very strict protocols in place for the passwords, the strength, etc. Built the site, it's great, and it had to be very secure. And then one day there was a demonstration going on, and the top person came to me and she said, "Phil, can you set up a user that we can all share, and can you make the password 123?" At which I said no. And it was like, but I need something really easy that everybody will be able to remember. And it's like, well, you're breaking all the rules here. You're sharing a password and an identity amongst multiple users. You give them all quite a high level of privilege to be able to show what you're doing. And it's really easy to hack. So a bit of an argument, but eventually I managed to persuade them that that wasn't the way, and we should use the system as it was intended and as it was built. And it's that sharing of passwords, it's effectively the weakest link in the chain. So if you have 5 sites that you're using the same password with, and one of them actually stores the passwords as plain text, and they get hacked, and so the hackers get the plain text version of the password without it being encrypted in trapdoor encryption, then they can just log into your sites. And the hackers will share the finds that they have, so that it will give away what your passwords are, so they can just try through all the different banks. It's not like someone sitting there. They've got bots that will actually automate this whole process. So it's really, really important that you use a different password for every single site that you have a login for. Now that becomes almost impossible to manage unless you use something like, I use Bitwarden. And that's one of the open source systems that will do it. There's LastPass, there's lots of different ones. And they really do allow you to be much, much stronger and have really strong passwords, but also a different password for every single account. And I mean, how many zeros in that? Million. So that's in the 1,900,000,000,000 users, usernames and passwords stolen in 2018. And 12,400,000 potential phishing victims in a year. And this is 2018, and it's just going up all the time. So I couldn't find newer figures, but it's horrendous at the moment. And it's one of the main topics on several of the websites and Radio 4 programs to do with money and keeping your money safe. People are falling foul to phishing attacks all the time. One-time passwords are enhanced security. Are one-time passwords, are one-time passwords as easy to phish? Right, so what I'm talking about here is a one-time password where you're getting something from the bank, you're getting something sent to you through to a text phone, and this is a 2FA, second authentication system. And a lot of people put a lot of faith in them. And so when we did Joomla London recently, I showed how they could easily be faked. And the very simple scenario is this, that imagine that you've got you're a hacker and you build a website and you call it bank.co.uk, whereas the real website name is bank.com. So they look very, very similar. And you send out this email, and it's got all the Chrome of the normal website that people expect. It's got the login page, and it's got a link to it. And when they click on that, they're not going to bank.com. They're going to the hackers bank.co.uk, and the first thing it asks for is username and password. So they are alerted, or a body's alerted, when someone actually goes to that site, which is a scam site, phishing site, and they put in their username and their password, and that comes through. Now, this site needs 2FA, so how can they possibly get that? Well, it's really simple. What happens is they take those credentials that you typed in, and they go to the real site, and they type them in. And the real site then says, okay, we're going to send you a text, and we want you to put in the first and the third of your extra pass of what we've just sent you, or some other various challenge. And the point is, what you then do as a hacker is you change that site and send back the message saying, I need the first and the third character of your extra password. So the person then puts in the first and third, and you go back to the real site and you put in the first and third, and you've now logged in. And the information for the first and third went to the person's phone genuinely from the real bank, because you logged into the real bank, you stimulated that email, that text message going to the person, but they are then typing into your fake phishing site, and you are the intermediary pasting that in. And I think one of the things is that people think that 2FA really, really does help with making it much stronger with those systems whereby you're asking for first and third digit, but it actually can give even more confidence to, or make you feel more confident and do really silly things thereafter. So if they ask you to then move money, or they ring up and say, oh, we just noticed you've logged in, that we're worried there's an attack going on, please will you move the money from this account to that account? We're giving you the details. In fact, we're going to give you the details through the website you just logged into, which is the fake site. People are likely to do that. And unfortunately, one of the big things at the moment is caller ID. So you might see something that 2FA come in with the bank's logo and all of the details. That is so easily faked. And in the UK, they're now starting to say, do not rely on it at all. And it will take up to 3 years to change to a secure system, which will stop people hijacking that. So they're becoming very sophisticated. They're using all the tools that were put in place to reassure people, and that's allowing them to do bigger and bigger scams. And we've had lots of policemen, teachers, people who you would hope would have understanding, read through the stuff, and watch what's happening, falling for these scams and losing huge amounts of money. So what's the answer to this? So one-time passwords. Bob used the password to log into a real site. The real site now asks for a one-time passover. Bob then shows that screen, and in the meantime, Alice has got the one-time password request. Alice then enters the details from her phone or another one-time password system, and that is then forwarded to Bob to tap in as the real password, and now they are in. The victim cannot always see the form URL. So when you've got a form, unless you know what you're doing, you won't necessarily see it. Universal two-factor 2FA security keys are much better, as they cannot be fooled by the phishing. They talk to the browser and remove the human. So these are U2F is a universal two-factor is a protocol, and a system that's being put in. With Joomla 4, we're using WebAuth. So WebAuth API is a standard, backwardly compatible with Universal two-factor API. You can migrate sites from Universal two-factor to WebAuth. WebAuth extends the authentication possibilities to encompass your fingerprint scanner or a pin on your Universal two-factor key. Now, here I've got one in my computer at the moment, so I can do stuff. And here's I always have a backup one. I put my two-factor onto everything. And here's a YubiKey that I use. One of the things that you don't want is your key to be in all the time, and someone, let's say, was trying to find out your credentials, and they put something onto your computers to find out what your credentials are. So they often have something you have to tap, and this is a capacitance key here, so that you're only injecting the solution when you tap that. And so you can leave it in. I actually like to take my key out of my computer and put it in when it's needed, and only when it's needed, and then take it out again when I've authenticated. That's the safest way. Now, it does mean that you've got to make sure you don't lose these, and you've got to physically have it here. But this is a much more secure way, much safer way. With some of the sites we're doing, this is the way we're trying to move our clients to. So WebAuth allows you to adopt its functionality in stages. You can use it for a drop-in replacement for Universal two-factor API for second factor authentication. Rushing a bit because we're getting low on time. Next, you can implement passwordless re-authentication for sensitive areas such as purchases. You can then use it as the primary login. So you don't have to switch your whole system over. You might, for example, one of my clients is a wine merchant. He might want users to be able to log in without this sort of thing, but then start to insist on it for the purchase part where money transactions happen. So you can bring in the harder security and the stronger security into certain areas of your site. And I would suggest that if you've got a social site where you want a lot of people to log in, and you could use a federated system for that, then in the secure backend area where people are administrating it, then definitely WebAuth will be the ideal. Joomla 4 makes it so easy. We've done a couple of demonstrations at Joomla London, and Gary, one of my colleagues there, we actually did a live demonstration, which always goes wrong, and it didn't. And he managed to log in and do everything fine. So let me just come on to that. So the WebAuth API, strong public key-based authentication, passwordless, user experience, simple, standard platform API. The way it works is you're setting up something that's private, you're then giving out a public key. The public key allows the system to do a calculation, and that calculation can then be sent, the results of it, and your private key basically can go, yeah, that's correct, or that's not correct. It doesn't actually give the key out. So you're basically, the challenge is being tested and the answer being given back. You're not sending a password, and you're not giving back a password. So this is much stronger way of doing things, and so you're not giving away your credentials. There's some URLs here that you can go to and say if anyone wants to follow this up. So that's the W3C user verification specification, which has all the details on there. And if you're interested in how the public key cryptography works, then there's a URL here on Wikipedia, which does go into detail, does explain it nicely, and has the usual Bob and Alice, I'm pretty sure it has Bob and Alice, representation so that you can follow it through. YubiKey, I really like. I like the simplicity of it. They just, I bought a whole set of YubiKeys, and the very next day they halved their price. So they have actually come down in price quite a lot. And I like this one because, and something to bear in mind, I'm just going to grab the other end of it. You'll see on some websites them say that you can't use one of these. Well, you can use one of these. They do it all the time. So this is a USB, normal USB, and this is the USB-C. You can put that in. So, for example, if I need to use it on my phone, then it will go straight into my phone because that's USB-C. If I need to use it on my computer, I don't have a USB-C. I can just put it into this and then put the USB in, and it works perfectly well. So you don't have to buy lots of different versions. I've not really got the time to go through all of this now, but I go through. There is a way to find out the settings on your key and all of that. That's what the screen was about, but I won't go into that now. With Joomla 4, you set it up in the back end against the users. So you can do it against each user. And what you do is you put your USB key in. You basically then click the button when it's asked for the capacitance. That will actually set it up. And so you can, and I would recommend you edit the name. So it gives it this, basically the date. And I would suggest you edit that so you can distinguish your different keys. So this is one key, this is another key. You want to know which key you're authenticating with, which one you've set up. So I always do 2 just in case, and it's good practice to leave one at home or in a safe place just in case you lose them. And the other one is kind of your traveling one. And then you go to the front end screen and no passwords needed. You just click on that web auth. As long as it's on HTTPS, it will then do the authentication challenge because you've set it up previously on the backend administration screen, and it just logs you in without needing a password. So absolutely brilliant, much quicker, really fast, and does work. In the new, this couple of months ago, in Chrome DevTools 87, there was a new, let me just quickly show you that. There's now a tab where you can actually look at the web auth information. You can see what's being presented, and it helps you to debug if you have any issues, and you can see which protocol you're using. So there's the U2F protocol being used there, but it's really useful for debugging the system. And finally, so we don't run out of time, as I say, I do the Joomla London user group. We meet on the 3rd Tuesday of every month, usually about 7 o'clock UK time. So at the moment, that's 6 p.m. UTC. If anyone wants to follow any of these topics up, wants some help to try and implement them, wants to do a workshop or anything, then please reach out and give me a shout, and I'll be happy to do that. And are there any questions?
Yay, thank you very much, Philip. That was great. And yes, we do have some questions. I'm going to start with the latest, because it was just what you just talked about. They wanted to know, does WebAuth work with devices that have Touch ID, like iPhone or the newer MacBooks? They have the...
Yes, so you can use Touch ID as the authentication. In fact, I use it for my banking. I find it so easy. It's actually easier to use my phone to do my banking than it is to use the website, because the website is still using all the old, I have to do a password, then it sends me a text message. I have to put the text message stuff in and backwards and forwards. With the phone, and also the really nice thing about it is I can show you and not give the details away, because it's not fingerprint, unless you can steal that. So
I also use biometric. I use face recognition on my iPhone too for different things.
So I can just click on that and that. Of course, it's not going to matter. Oh, there we go. So it's just logged me in. So it really is that easy. And I'm not going to turn it around because it's not giving my balance and everything. But that is really easy and quick. I'm done.
Awesome.
Whereas with the website, it's a lot more hassle. And the important thing is you're not sharing passwords. You're not using passwords that you're recycling. Years ago, I work a lot for one of the universities. And years ago, a professor of financial computing sat down and wanted me to log in for him. And I said, well, you do it yourself. He said, no, I'll give you a password. And he gave me the password. I said, no, I don't want to. He said, don't worry, I have another one. And that itself made me worry. And then he had 2 passwords. Things have evolved, but you really shouldn't use passwords.
Okay. All right. And then I've got 2 more questions here. Brian asked a question, and then Bruce, hi Bruce, by the way, asked another question, kind of piggybacked on to Brian. So this is when you were talking about the one-touch login. And they said if someone is set up as a user in User Manager, so already a user in Joomla, and they use the same email address on the one-tap, how does Joomla handle that? And then tied on to that, basically, they just want to know, how does the one-touch relate to your Joomla users? And I think you probably already addressed it as brand new site, no users, a site with existing users, and then implementing that. And they want to know, like, how does that tie into groups, view levels, such?
So when I set up the new, when I set up a Joomla 4 site, I use password to first go in. Then I go into the back end, set up the, you have to set the plugin on so that you can do it. And then that will appear against each of your users, and you can set the users up independently. So for example, you could have the super admins have to use your 2FA, but managers don't, because they've got much reduced permissions, and registered users, which could be from a federation sign up. So they're clicking the Google button, their details are being put in as in email and stuff like that. They may not need to at all, because it's a much lower privilege, and you're not so worried about, again, it's all passwordless. So you're not so worried about them, because they're being authenticated against Google. So you don't have to do it for everybody. You can literally roll it out slowly. So I always insist that my staff do it on some of the really secure sites, and we've got our YubiKeys, and we all use those. But the clients have to choose themselves, and look, a lot of clients are still don't understand it, a bit suspicious, and because of lockdown, we can't physically go and see them, so we can't show them the physical demonstration. But I think once we can, we'll be using YubiKey and these solutions more and more and more.
And what do you think about Google Auth app versus YubiKey?
Well, you can use, right, so the authentication Google app, I've seen ways to break that.
Really?
Yes. So there are scenarios that you can get which can make it not so secure in one way of using it. But you can actually use your YubiKey with it. And so you're logging in and doing it. So you're not having to get the numbers and type those in, but you're using the Google authentication but with your YubiKey, so that you can do it through that. So that is probably the most secure way, because not all websites have the system set up, they connect in via the Google, but they don't necessarily have the way to go from UB straight to them. So you can use the UB in Google to then go into the website to do the whole authentication chain. And that's one way to get around it. And there's lots of demonstrations of that online.
Sure.
There's a lot of erroneous information as well talked about. And that's why I mentioned this, because a lot of sites say you have to, you can't use it through an adapter, and you definitely can, because I do all the time. I see we've got a +1 for Bitwarden. Bizarrely, it was actually MI5 that brought me onto Bitwarden. One of the meetings that I had was with a lot of security guys, and they were all identifying themselves. It's unusual for those guys to identify themselves, and they recommended Bitwarden. So I thought, yep, fine. And in fact, you can host it yourself. So if you're that distrusting, my colleague Gary, he's actually using the open source Bitwarden, and he's hosting his own server with all of his details on, so it doesn't go out onto the web. He can actually manage the whole thing himself. So with Bitwarden, you can actually set up your own system and not use the cloud solution.
Awesome. That is cool. You know, I know I've found with some of my clients that when we're going to implement two-factor, sometimes it could be a budgeting issue for supplying UB keys to everyone. And I know they've gotten cheaper now, but so sometimes they wanted a hybrid mix of like Google Auth apps for keys as versus just UB keys. And so I don't think it, I mean, I was just happy they were using two-factor, so I didn't care what they use, right? I was like, oh yes, thank you. So, but have you seen any problems with the mixed solution? I mean, we've used it on a few clients and haven't had any problems, but I'm just curious if you've seen anything.
No, no, I haven't had any. The only problems we've had is people literally losing their UB key and not having a backup. So we've then had to go in and reset, basically go in, kill that authentication. They put a new key in and authenticate against it, and then they're away again. So as long as you've got, I think the point is that the top level really has to make sure that they've got secure backup of the UB key and that two-factor authentication. If the worst comes to the worst, you can, of course, go in through the back end. You can switch your authentication off via the database, and then you can, you know, if you forgot your password and everything, you can do the whole secret password, reapply the database thing. So there is a way, if you can get into your database, to reset everything. So that's the important thing. But you don't really want to be using that unless you really have to.
Cool. I'm going to, can you turn off your screen share too? That way we'll have full video for these last. Are there any other questions? If you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A. You can put them in the chat now that I'm looking at both. So if you guys have any more questions, let us know. And we'll get Philip to answer those questions before we get out of here. But I have to get us out of here in 6 minutes because we're on a schedule, people. And I'm saying this and laughing because I'm usually the one that's always like to the wire finishing, as Philip knows.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I'm trying to rush through some of the bits, but yeah.
By the way, I did
I'm
sorry, go ahead.
Do you need to mention the sponsors at all?
Well, we mentioned them before, but
okay.
yes.
Okay.
Awesome. SD said great info. She learned a lot. Cool. I also did an OS tips about just how to enable it in Joomla 3, though, not Joomla 4, like what you were talking about. Yeah. I'll drop a link in later on to the video there if people are interested in going ahead and getting started with their Joomla 3 side, because I mean it's built into Joomla to be able to turn on and use YubiKey, to use Google Auth, and you know it's really. I always feel so much better when my clients will listen to me and actually do it. It's like, oh yes, thank goodness, because you know, I just feel it's much more secure, obviously. Just like the example you gave. I was glad you gave that example of someone phishing and getting the password.
Yes, because that's one of the things. The more levels of complexity you add, the more people seem to trust it. But if it's fundamentally broken from the start, then they're putting a great amount of trust in. So if it was just simply hacking password, you might not trust them to move 10 grand. But if they do the two-factor, you've got the call identifier and all of that, you really put a lot of trust in. If they then suddenly say, we are the bank and you know you're going to be hacked and we need you to move it to this account, because you've gone through so many. And in fact, banks have actually seen that there's a problem and they've actually texted halfway through the process, and the robbers, the people who are doing the phishing, are going, yes, sorry, our systems will be tripping soon and you will be getting a thing. And they cover themselves. So then the person gets it, another one, a genuine one from the bank. And they go, oh yeah, that's the one I told you about. And so we've had a lot of this, and caller ID has been a real problem because people really put their trust in it.
And we've got one more question here too. Is the Jug London digital available as well? So in other words, you guys do record all of the London Jug meetings, correct? And put them out there?
We record quite a few of them, but not all of them. Sometimes we have technical issues. I think it's probably the best way. And so there's quite a few on the YouTube under the Joomla London user group. What's the word? Collection channel. And so go back and see those. But if it's not there, I mean, usually I know we're doing your one at the moment. It's a little bit of editing to do, but
okay. Yes, I used a word I shouldn't have. I didn't know.
No, just Gary likes to take out all the breaks and everything. But yeah, all the others are there if we've got them, and if they're not there, we haven't got them. But we like to do the workshops, and the workshops are so we usually have a speaker, and then we have a workshop, and some of the workshops can get quite technical, and they go wrong. So you don't show that. But you still learn a lot, and you learn a lot from the process of it going wrong, especially as we've been doing lots on Joomla 4. Of course, Joomla 4 is in development. So sometimes we've hit things and gone, right, need to put in a bug report,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great. I mean, you guys are helping debug. I love it. I love it. You're teaching and debugging at the same time. Fantastic. Okay, guys. Well, we've got 2 minutes here, so I do just want to, give another shout out, especially Watchful, our gold sponsor. And I want to remind you that you've got a little break here, a 15-minute break. You can either obviously go refill your coffee cup like I'm going to do. You can also then hop into our speed networking and meet somebody new, or maybe you'll run into somebody that you know already and just can get a one-on-one session with them. And then also you can go to the expo and see our sponsor booths. Like I said, there's some specials in there, so go and check it out. And I know some of the booths are going live today as well. So. And we will see you on the next go around. Thank you so much, Philip. Great information. And remember, the sessions are recorded, and so after the fact, they will be available to all ticket holders.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.